I'm Clayton Collins, CEO at HousingWire and your host for the Powerhouse podcast. Today's guest is Victor Ciardelli, President and CEO of Guaranteed Rate. And this episode is exactly what we started and designed Powerhouse for. We talk about Victor's entrepreneurial journey from selling loans in a call center to building Guaranteed Rate, building partnerships with real estate agents and brokerages, and the path that ultimately led to acquiring PHH Mortgage and really building Guaranteed Rate affinity years down the road. The conversation also explores leadership, technology, compliance, loan officer compensation, and so many topics that are important to all leaders across the mortgage and housing industry. I hope you enjoy this amazing episode with Victor Ciardelli, President and CEO of Guaranteed Rate. Victor, thank you for joining me. I feel like this conversation has been a long time coming, and I'm thrilled to get a chance to get you on the mic and the camera today to have a fun conversation.
I'm happy to do it, and it's good to see you. I know we talked a bunch of times, but it's good to see you face to face.
Absolutely. I mean, I wish we were actually recording in the same room. We'll have to do that another time. But today,
Definitely.
virtually, You in Florida, me in Texas, we're going to have a good conversation. So we built this Powerhouse podcast to interview some of the most leading and powerful and entrepreneurial executives in the housing world. And your track record of building Guaranteed Rate's been, absolutely admirable. And I'm excited to dig in and hear more about the journey. Talk about the journey to where you are today, and then, talk business strategy and the mortgage industry some. But I'd love to start out with hearing more about your story of building Guaranteed Rate and entering the mortgage industry. It's always fascinating to hear the founding roots that feel so, are often so far away from these large enterprises that the one you run today.
Yeah. I mean, to go way back, the story is kind of crazy. Let's see. I was selling commercial real estate, just got out of school, and it was 1991. And I was in Chicago, in the West Loop and the South Loop in Chicago. I think at that time there were more foreclosures than there were sales. Vacancy rate on commercial properties like office buildings were 20%. So it was really, really tough. But I started with a really good group of guys out of college, and everybody was hustling. And because the market was so tough, guys were just dropping like flies. It'd be one guy'd be like, I'm going to go get a job selling insurance. I'm going to go get a job doing this. I'm going to get a job doing that. And I had this developer that I was working with who had all these loft warehouses in the South Loop. And he was trying to sell them. And I found a buyer who was really a great developer. And I kept putting these guys together. And finally got a deal done where we went under contract. And at the time I was 24 years old, and it was going to be a big commission to me, life altering commission. I think it was going to be over $100,000 commission. And I was all excited. I was sad. I was already thinking about, taking the money and putting it in a building that I wanted to buy, and then they were telling me they can't secure financing. And I was like, okay, explain this. So they had a prospectus. So I started making phone calls to banks. I was trying to help them find financing. And while that was going on, it was looking pretty bleak that the deal was going to go. And a guy who I used to work with called me up and asked me, what I'm doing. And I told him, he said, did you get that deal done? I said, nah, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And he said, well, I'm working for this mortgage company, and we're doing debt consolidations, and we're refinancing people's loans. And at the times they were working off of interest rates that were crazy, 18%, 16%, Ford Motor Credit, household finance, associate finance, things like that. So I was like, well, how is he? He said, well, we're closing loans in 30 days. I'm making $1,000, a week. And I was like, all right, I'll check it out. So they had a telemarketing operation, and he worked it out with the owner for me to go out. And I worked 2 nights as a telemarketer, and they had about 6 telemarketers that were there. And I was already used to being on the phone. I didn't have any call reluctance. And so I was just like talking to customers, having fun with it, and then I would take a lead and pass it off, take a lead, pass it off. And it was I actually really enjoyed it. And the owner came up to me at the end of the night. He said, "Do you know that you passed off more leads than all 6 guys?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that." He goes, "I'd love to teach you to be a loan officer." I was like, well, I'm still selling commercial real estate. I'm really not sure, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to at least try this. So I came back the second night, did the same thing, outproduced all the 6 guys again. And then I told my buddy, I said, "Hey, let's go have a beer." So we went and had a beer, and I said, "Listen, I think this is it." I said, "Let's start our own mortgage company," and he cracked up. He's like, "You're out of your mind." I was like, "You work 2 nights as a telemarketer. I've been here for 4 months or something." He's like, "That doesn't make any sense." I'm like, "Why not?" So he agreed. And then there's a whole story around, because I had no money. There's a whole story around how I actually started the mortgage company. I don't know if you want to hear that.
Well, I want to know what gave you the gusto instead of accepting the job, say, let's just do this on our own. What went on in your head between saying okay, yeah, I'll come originate for you and make some money. Yeah. I'll probably kick ass and beat all your other guys and make a ton of money. But what gave you the gusto to say, let's just do this on our own?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I tell this story once in a while. So years ago, my dad bought our house from a guy named Wayne Huizinga in Oak Brook, Illinois. And if anybody knows Wayne Huizinga, Wayne started waste management with one dump truck and built it to be the largest waste company in the world. And so I didn't know anything about Wayne,
but I knew the Chicago area and went down to Florida too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then weird as it may be, a guy who went to grammar school with, his dad was partners with Wayne and ran the U.S. operation for waste management. And then a guy who I met when I was 19 years old became one of my closest friends. Strangely, his dad became partners with Wayne when he ran international waste management. So all 3 of the guys kind of retired at the same time. And so I just saw these guys on this, on this rise, and I had just a lot of confidence. I had, I was just very entrepreneurial. I would start my own. I started a tarring company. I did different things, to kind of, run my own business. So I was really confident, and I loved what Wayne did. And I always thought, well, if Wayne could do it, I could do it, right? And so I had this, drive to build something, prove myself, and scale a business in a very large way. It's what I wanted to do, right? So it was already kind of it was like a deep desire, burning desire to get into some industry. And, it just happened to be the mortgage business, right? It wasn't like I set out to, I didn't even know anything about mortgages. I wasn't, getting out of college, I had no idea about the mortgage business. It's just one of those random things. If that real estate deal would have closed, there's no way I'd be in the mortgage business. If that guy who worked for me didn't introduce me to the mortgage business, there's no way I would have been in the mortgage business. Right. So it just was just kind of a random thing that occurred.
So did that business that you started after, 2 nights of telemarketing and a couple beers, is that the business that is now Guaranteed Rate?
No. So the first company was called Guaranteed Financial Mortgage. And we started it in February of 92. And it was just the 2 of us. He is a really good guy, but at the time he was doing liquid lunches. His work ethic wasn't that great, and we're calling off of we had these old trunk line phones. It was just, the phones were so bad. And the office was, old brown shag carpeting. It was like this old nasty paneling. It looked like you're in the 1960s in somebody's basement. It was so bad. But I just was I was determined. I was hustling. So I would just call off these call sheets. And from the time anybody would be willing to pick up a phone in the morning, like at, pretty much like 9 a.m. And I would go till literally like almost 9 o'clock at night. I was just an animal. Like I was just cranking out calls. And my partner at the time, he just didn't have the same work ethic. So we were all good, but we parted ways, I think, after like 4 or 5 months. It wasn't a big thing, right? I mean, there was nothing 100%. I mean, it was like nothing, like we had nothing. So it was like him going to do his thing. I did my thing. And I kind of partnered with another guy who owned a mortgage company who was helping me out. And I remember calling him and I said, hey, I need some help here. So he showed up. I'll never forget. He showed up about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had these lead sheets that were stacked like this. And he said, what in the world? And I said, I've never seen anything like this. So we sat there from 1 o'clock. He left my office. We got pizza. We had a couple beers, and he left around 2 o'clock at night. And he went through each one and said, this is garbage. Because I would print out a credit report with the lead sheet. And he said, this one's garbage. This one's doable. This is how, this is why. And, kind of went through it all. And then I go, okay, great. And I'd be back, next day calling, hey, this is what, so working through it. And what I realized is that part of the business wasn't really for me. So I wanted to learn the conforming side. So I didn't know what to do. So I bought the Fannie Mae standards books, where it's a book about that thick. And it's basically cliff notes on the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac guidelines. So I actually bought the books and I would read them multiple times and highlight them and memorize them. And that's how I learned myself how to do conforming loans. And then I realized I still needed more context because I was being more of a salesperson when I was working with a lot of these deals. So Freddie Mac at the time in Chicago, they had a big office on Wacker, and I signed up for this underwriting program that they had. And I think it was 2 nights a week, maybe 3. I think it was 2 nights a week for like 3 hours each night. And they went through, collateral, they went through the whole thing. And by the time I was done, I was like, oh my God, the business just became super easy to me because I was being a sales guy and trying to jam, this file as a square peg in a round hole. And it was like, and I'm all of a sudden became clear. I'm like, God, I'm making my customers' lives really difficult, and I'm making my own life really difficult. And then that way, everything changed for me. At that point is when I was able to communicate with customers and say, we could do things the easy way, or we could do it the hard way. And I was like, you want to know the difference between both? And other customers, because I worked with a lot of self-employed borrowers, and they said, yeah, tell me the detail. So I'm like, the easy way is I ask you what we need, and you just give it to me, and we get the loan closed right away. The hard thing is you pushing back, telling me all the things that you don't want to get this, you don't want to get that. But in the end, I'm still going to go get them all from you. I can take what you're going to give me, submit it to underwriting, and underwriting is going to tell me I need all these documents anyways, and I'm having to go back to you and say, I'm going to get these back. And then, they would laugh and they're like, okay.
You knew how to speak the language of your borrower. I mean, that's like such like a clear like communication trick that like so many originators today should even leverage. You want to do this the easy way or the hard way? Because that situation still exists very much so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find the difference between mega producers and people who are not is really a lot of it is the knowledge of the business, understanding their guidelines, and then having confidence in what they're doing to communicate that to the borrower, right? Because ultimately, when the borrower is buying their home, they really want to go with somebody they trust that is going to they're going to put them in the best hands to be able to get the loan closed properly, right?
I feel like when originators or any sales professional is like in kind of a weaker like psychological or like knowledge place, you want to like the customer's always right, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you let the customer walk all over you, they're going to, if you don't move with confidence and move with authority based on the experience you have as an advisor to clients. So I feel like it's like a confidence level that helps the best salespeople, the best originators give advice without like getting, walked all over and doing it the hard way.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. It's like, and the thing is, it's not really in the mortgage business because it is people. I don't think realize how complex the mortgage business is. You have every single customer has a different credit profile than everybody else, right? Their credit score is different, their income's different, their job's different, their job history is different, their loan amount's different, the property value is different, the type of property is different. Everybody has this unique profile. And you're taking somebody with every unique profile and you're putting them into the proper program that suits them. It's really a skill, right? And so from an originator standpoint, the originators who are able to articulate that well to a borrower and let them know about all the different options that they have and educate them and then tell them how they're going to get their loan approved quickly and efficiently. To me, like if I was a borrower, that's the person I would rather go with than the one that's going, can I get back to you? I got to follow up on this. Let me check. Let me research all the different programs. and then you're on the phone going, wait, is this really the person I should be working with? Is this the person I have the most confidence in? So that's that, so I think that's a key component.
I know like one of your top guys, Sean, he moves with like a level of like kindness, urgency, and authority that like you just trust what he says and like you're gonna do what he asks because like he's got the reps in. I feel like there's a communication flow that like helps people elevate to that place.
Yeah, Sean and Ben Cohen, they're monsters, right? And Ben and I worked on the same floor in Chicago for years and years and years. And so I would walk by and hear Ben. And the one thing, and I know Sean is exactly the same way, is they're very nice, but they're very clear with the customer on what they can do to get their loan closed quickly and efficiently. And they talk with this level of confidence and authority where if I'm on the other side of that, I walk by and I'm like, he's so good on the phone. It just makes you just feel like the confidence. Like if I'm that customer and I'm looking at buying a house, feel like I'm in good hands with those guys.
You don't feel like you've probably all been in sales situations where you feel like as the consumer, the borrower, you need to like take the reins. But when you have someone that like knows how to speak in the right cadence, has the experience, delivers authority and respect, you're like, okay, like I don't need to feel like I need to take the reins on this. You listen, you take the advice. So Victor, I know we're talking about like a 30-year story here, but so back in the like the early days, were you brokering out the gate? Like how did the business evolve to like become the entity that you scaled to the GR that we all know today?
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, no, it's crazy because I didn't know anything, So every step I'm having to figure it out and evolve what that next step is and how to get to the next step, right? So yeah, broker for sure. And then not only brokering, I was actually brokering at first only subprime deals.
Okay.
So that's how I started off.
And that was when that Freddie course helped you kind of step into the conventional space and move a little faster.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I ended up building a relationship with a person that owned the Coldwell Banker franchise in Chicago. And I started off and he said, I'll tell you what, go ahead and go to this one office on Ashland and Diversey and you can meet with the manager there. And if they like you, you could do an office presentation. I said, great. And again, I was really young and I'm figuring it out. So I went in there in front of they got their agents together. I did an office presentation. And then there's one of the guys in there was a bigger producer. And he talked to me, and then I ended up working with him, and ball games, lunch, dinners. Oh, I was doing open house, whatever I could do. Built a relationship. Now I'm starting to get business from this office, but I'm now starting to my own company. So I was like, I had another loan officer. I put him in there and said, here, started working with that office. Then the manager was like, hey, this guy's a great guy. You should definitely, have him come to your office. Great. Came to that office. So long story short, I built a relationship with all 10 managers of all the franchise offices. And now I'm involved with the whole group. I'm hiring loan officers, putting them inside the offices. They had finally agreed to do an MSA with me, do an MSA agreement with them. And now off to the races. And a huge percentage of my business is this co-banker franchise that had 10 offices, about 450 real estate agents. And I was like, so, and the other thing is, as a broker, it's brutal because your whole livelihood revolves on the success of the broker closing the loan, right? And so what happened was I had to become really close friends with everybody because I had to deal with the bumps in the road, right? Because there's always a bump in the road. And I had to make sure that I became really close to everybody. So when that bump in the road hit, I was able to, get through it without them tossing me aside or not referring me another deal.
Giving you the benefit of the doubt, the bumps in the road aren't always your fault, and that like the bumps are going to come. They're market induced, property induced, borrower induced, but like the fact that you can build trust like gives the agent confidence to at least talk it through and not be like, screw Victor, he didn't get it done.
Exactly. And I always blame myself.
Yeah.
Always. That was the one thing I would highly recommend, is never blame anyone. Blame yourself. I said, I screwed this, this happened with closing, but I could have done, this, but I'm going to do this now. This is how I'm going to fix it. I got this. So they'd be like, okay, because I then became in control. If I gave up control and said, my closer totally screwed up, my underwriter screwed up, I use this wholesaler and they stink, they're terrible, then they'd be like, oh God, he's so out of control. He doesn't have control over this situation. I don't want to use him, right? But if I blame myself that I own it and I'm in control and I could change the outcome next time, they're like, okay, that's fine. Just fix it next time and make sure that doesn't happen again. You got it.
Yeah.
So at that time, I really had to hustle to control the business. So I had to get the warehouse lines, get the correspondence. So I needed to control the entire ecosystem because I couldn't have it where I wasn't in control, because not being in control is like I always called it, you're building a foundation on mud, It's like you just don't have any solid footing anywhere. It just constantly feels like everything is moving out from under you because of the lack of control. And that was the problem with my first company. Also, the premise of it was, not great, So Guaranteed Financial Mortgage was kind of like any other mortgage company. Didn't have really anything that we stood for. It was just every loan officer, throws their shingle on top of, my shingle. And that was about it. It wasn't much to it. And then so what happened was the guy who owned the franchise came to me one day and said, he went to lunch and he said, hey, I'm telling you something in confidence nobody knows. But I know you have a lot of eggs in my basket. And, but I sold to Coldwell Banker. And they have their own mortgage company. At the time, it was called Sendon.
So he sold his franchise up to be corporate owned, and then and that kills the MSAs to.
Yeah, and then he was kind of still around because he came I guess like a regional president for them, or however they had it at the time. And so then I'm like, oh, because this business I already thought was tough back then. And I did that for 8 years, and I'm trying to scale. I mean, I am working my butt off to try and scale the business. And it was literally brutal. It was brutal. I felt like I used the analogy. I was just running into a brick wall every day and not getting anywhere, or building a foundation on mud and not getting anywhere. It's really kind of both of those, right? So yeah, that was really, really challenging.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So like that was Caldwell Banker. If I'm not mistaken, like, have you developed a new partnership with Caldwell since then? Like the MS, that was the beginning of an MSA like strategy, right?
Yeah. So I don't know how many people are on here believe in law of attraction and kind of manifestation, but I really do, right? And so
Convince us, make us all believers.
Yeah. So, a couple things is, one is, at the time that was going on, I started to say, all right, let me look at other industries, because I wanted to get us involved in something that I could scale, right? I wanted to build something significant. Again, I go back to, what Wayne did. And I remember I was I think I was 21 years old, 22 years old, when in my buddy's house, there was this perspective on his bed. And I was like, hey, what's this? And he said, this is, and said Blockbuster video on it. He said, oh, my dad gave this to me. He said, this is something you should read, that, this is stuff that you're going to read someday in your life. And, you might as well look at this. This is a business that we're getting involved in. And so I said, well, can I read it? He's like, yeah. So I took it. He let me read it. So I'm reading it and I'm like super interested. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. And at the time, he ended up partnering, and him and Wayne are friends, John Melk and Wayne Huizinga. And they were friends. And John presented Blockbuster Video idea to Wayne. And then all of a sudden, Blockbuster Video went, they got involved and bought all these video stores, and boom, they're just taking off, and then they're in their launch stage, and I'm seeing all this go on while I'm, sucking wind, running Guaranteed Financial Mortgage. And I'm like, God, if these guys can, did waste management. Now they're doing Blockbuster Video. And then they did, some other ones called Boston Chicken, things like that. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is I could definitely do this. I could, So I started to look outside of the mortgage business, and I looked at all different opportunities. And what happened was, I just got back to it and I said, I've been at the mortgage business for 8 years. I know more about the mortgage business than I do anything else. Anything else I get into, I'm going to still have to cut my teeth and learn it and scale something, right? But I know more about the mortgage business than anything. And the one thing I really need to focus on is really coming back to the customer, like the customer experience, like getting back to the value proposition, like putting it down where at the time I looked at the mortgage business as 3 customers. The customer that we're getting the loan for, the loan officer that, we're helping build and grow their business, as well as recruit to be a part of Guaranteed Rate, and why they should come over and work for Guaranteed Rate. And then third is the referral partner, right? I mean, so the referral partner is a key component, to the success of any mortgage company. So I wrote down every value proposition. I said, I want to create the greatest value proposition for all 3 of those customers than any other bank or mortgage company in the country. That's my goal, right? So that's what I did. And this is now, if you go back, this is in 1999. And in 1999, it was like the wild, wild west. And what I mean by that is customers were playing games with, loan officers were playing games with customers based on rates and fees. And it was literally, I used to call it the shell game. Is they would confuse customers all the time, and they were liars. I mean, they just were born liars. Is they got up every day and they lied to customers and they cheated them, and customers were being taken advantage of. And the mortgage business was looked at as like a used car. I remember there were surveys out of like the worst rated industry, and loan officers and used car salesmen were basically on parallel, right? As far as sleazy, right?
Dude, I grew up around the industry. My dad's an originator. I was there. Like, I remember like those time periods. And I remember like in a very like honest, straightforward originator. I remember like the bad cloud over mortgage in that time period. And like, for, the people who were doing it right and had values and ethics, like it wasn't a good look or a good feeling, kind of the way the industry was going.
Yeah, no, honestly, it was disgusting. It would it would it was gross, right? Because yeah, I mean, it was just a different time. It was really bad,
Yeah.
right? Because people are bragging, they come back from a closing, and I just made all this money on this one borrower, and it's like, what am I doing? Like, and it was like, at the time, I was like, what am I a part of? Like, what is this industry? Like, this is not good,
It's making Wayne Huizinga's waste management industry look squeaky clean.
Right. I mean, but here's the thing is, and this is where I looked at the opportunity. I was like, because of this is so gross and and nasty, and the way that people are treating customers and playing the games, I'm going to come out and I'm going to be the anti all that. And we came out with one fixed fee, and then we came out with a low margin rate. The trouble that I had is finding loan officers that were willing to do it. Like, loan officers were like, what are you talking about? You're talking about like, you're going to put me in a box that I can't like change my, like make more money on this bar, make more money on that bar. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And the premise of the company was the little old lady shopping for a loan shouldn't get a worse rate than the, I would call it attorney or Wall Street guy who's out there beating everybody else up on rate and fee and knows how to play the game.
Borrower financial sophistication shouldn't drive pricing outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was like, and that's the thing. It was like, it was fundamental, like just not fair, right? That the people who knew how to play the game and negotiate and push a loan officer into and like do all this work to get the best rate should get the best rate, and the people who are less educated get the worst rate. I was like, this is not right. And so the funny thing was, the whole premise was the organization was built on that. And then it was built on the efficiency of the originator, getting them away from doing what they don't want to do, which is process loans, and having them do what they want to do is being the rainmaker, right? So I knew that, like, from a loan officer standpoint, you put them in a competitive situation to be able to win more deals, take the pressure away from processing. And then from a real estate agent perspective, like, the value prop on both fronts on the front end is, taking care of the customer, one fixed fee, low rates, the efficiency of the process, utilizing technology to make things easier. The referral partner would be happy, right? So what happened was everybody's like, oh, real estate agents don't care about their customer getting the best rate. And I was like, wait a second, you might be right on 80% of the real estate agents that are doing 20% of the business, right? Right? It was like, or let's call it 70% of the real estate agents doing 30% of the business. However, the 80, 20, 70, 30 rule goes into play. But I'm like, that's true. But the 20% that are doing 80% or the 30% doing 70%, they care about their customer, and they care deeply about making sure that their customer is not taken advantage of. Those are the ones I'm working with, and those are the ones I'm going after. So the entire platform and the entire company was built on that model, as far as identifying the top 20%, top 30% of the agents that are doing 80 to 70% of the business, and tell them the value proposition to the consumer to the originator and how that benefits them. And it was crazy. It was literally fish like jumping in the boat. It was like agents were like, oh my God, I'm so sick of this loan officer that I'm referring business to that's I know taking advantage of my customer, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And I'd be like, great, just try us. And they'd be like, try us. And it was like smooth, simple. Customers like, this is great. This is great. And then of course, all the agent wants is to make sure that the top agent wants not only for you to get the deal done, but for you to make them look good, right, in the process, right? So that was that was the kind of the cornerstone of guaranteed rate when we started.
So I was digging through one of our data sources and noticed that 2023 guaranteed rate was the only top 10 lender with over 90% purchase, if that data is right. So like a standout on like purchase business. So is it that that agent like relationship that's like endured and like kept driving like purchase really high in your product mix?
Yeah, I mean, like we've always been purchase first. And to go back to what you asked about with Coldwell Banker.
Okay.
And it's interesting, because we talked about, I got off track on the manifestation, right? And the law of attraction, right? With when the whole Coldwell Banker thing. So when that went down, and I was trying to figure out where to go with getting into the mortgage business. I literally, once I locked in that I was starting guaranteed rate, I was putting the best value proposition together. I really understand agents. At that point, I knew that someday I would end up working with Coldwell Banker again. And I had this feeling that I would end up purchasing their mortgage company and partnering with them. Like it was like, it's one of those things. It's like I always call it, I always use this term like Rubik's Cube. Like when you click it, it's like all of a sudden it's like, boom, you get it, right? And I feel like I really knew that was going to happen. And so, and we're bouncing around, jumping ahead, but I'll just go into this. So in 2016, I get a phone call from, I think my CFO, and he said, hey, are you interested in being one of the companies that would be interested in purchasing PHH Home Loans, which is Coldwell Banker's partnership? And I was like, I'm not even kidding you. Right when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. Yeah, we're doing this. Like, yeah, I knew at that point it was a foregone conclusion. And it was funny because we were invited in. So they narrowed it down to, I don't know, 4 mortgage companies or something.
So it was a banker deal. There was an M&A banker advising, kind of running a mini process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they had a bunch of them, and they narrowed it down to like 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it was. I'm not even sure because I wasn't even really, they didn't even communicate the other companies. But so I went into New Jersey, and it was me and 2 other guys. And I'm sitting in this huge boardroom with this massive conference table. And the CEO is flanked on both sides with like 8 people or 9 people on one side, 8 people and 9 people on the other side. And it was funny because I said to him, I said, you know what? I feel like this is destiny. I feel like this is meant to be that I'm here. And he was super confused. Everyone's like really confused. And I told him the story. And I said, listen, you guys actually pushed me out of my first mortgage company, and I started guaranteed rate with a significantly better value proposition to our customers than anyone else. And the one thing I am really clear on is understanding real estate agents and understanding what the agent wants and how they think, right? And we are here to serve you, serve the agent. Like that's our focus. That's what we're good at. That's what we're about. And I recommended him to contact his agents and ask them who the most trusted mortgage lender is. Like find out who they think is when there's a deal that you're doing who is like the most trusted company that they feel like they could count on. And they came back, and it was guaranteed rate. And so he said, and they chose us, right? They chose us because it was trust. Because the thing is that with PHH Home Loans, they broke the trust. It was gone. The loan officers were quitting left and right, and they weren't getting any business. They treated the mortgage arm as they weren't there. I mean, they literally was like they didn't exist. I didn't know how bad it was until we took it over. Honestly, I didn't have any clue. And then when we took it over, that's a funny story in itself. You want to hear that one?
A good M&A integration story? How can I say no? Let's hear it. Like, yeah. And I mean, like, I'll preface, it always sucks when you do a deal and there's something under the hood you didn't know, but when it's something that hopefully lets you create value, then like, let's hear.
Yeah. So, loan officers were quitting like, I don't know. I think when we started the deal, it was at like 470 loan officers by the time and it takes time from the time that you negotiate to the time you actually close on it. And then you do the integration, and the integration's, longer than you want, but so we closed in, I think it's, oh my gosh, the fact that I don't know this exactly, but January of 2016 or 17. I think it's 16 maybe.
I mean, I have all my deal close dates tattooed on me, so you got to remember that, Victor. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh.
I'll remember the HousingWire date forever. April 25th, 2016. That was a deal date I'll never forget.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why. Everything is like forward. I'm always like, what's next? Keep going. But yeah, But what happened was we did the final integration. Everybody was on board by the end of December, and they had a President's Club meeting scheduled, and this is like mid-January. So I show up and getting to meet everybody, and the first thing I run into is 4 women that are the wives of some of my originators. And I was like, hey, how's everyone doing? It's nice to see everyone, and they, they're like, and I think at this point they're just kind of drinking by the pool all day. And they were really transparent and open with me, which I really appreciate. And they said, yeah, no, it's terrible. Like, no one's happy. No one likes it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what? Really? Like, why? And it gave me some feedback. So I grabbed the top originators. I brought them over, and I was like, hey, I just heard this. What's going on? And we said, hey, we were told not to tell you. And I was like, really? Why? And they're like, I guess, people are worried about their jobs, and, you just took it over and they don't know you and everything. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So I got everybody in. I said, listen, I want to get everybody into a room tomorrow morning. So I got the hotel to agree to get a ballroom, and we got everybody in there. And we talked to them. We said, my team came in, and we said, listen, we can't fix anything unless we know what's broken. So I stood up in front of everybody, and they gave, my team was writing everything down. And for 4.5 hours, it was just rapid fire of everything that's wrong. And I was like, I want to hear everything. I don't, to whatever it is, underwriting, closing, marketing, technology, how, anything works, like your computers, your laptops, whatever. I want to hear everything. 4.5 hours of everything. And then I said, all right, now you all go have a good vacation. we're going to get to work. The team's going to get to work. So we sat in the ballroom and broke out everything into categories, underwriting. Here's all the complaints around underwriting. Let's put all those in a category. Here's all the complaints around closing. So we broke it all out. Within really 60 days, we fixed about 60% of everything that they had issues on. Within the next probably 60, we got through the other 20%. And then there was about 20% that we wouldn't do for a reason, but we were really transparent of what that reason is and kind of went through and talked to them. And I would say pretty much everybody from that day is still here because we forged this bond together, of saying, all right, the old guard is gone. Here we just took it over. We built trust. We got on the same page. We knew, they knew we had their backs, and they had our backs. We worked together as a team, and it's been unbelievable since. And now, culturally, we're completely integrated with Coldwell Banker. They're just a fantastic group of people. The team there is great. The presidents are great. Everybody is really, really fantastic. So yeah, it's worked out really, really well. So it went from, this, I say the plane, on fire, going down, ready to hit the, tarmac, and we ended up pulling it out. So it's been great.
That's a phenomenal story. And the cream of it, the cream of the top for me is like this emphasis of the intersection of mortgage and real estate. And like, that's a big part of my thesis and strategy at HousingWire, is bringing the real estate and mortgage sides of our like incredibly interconnected sector closer together. So with through our Real Trends acquisition, we've been trying to bring the brokers and agents closer to HousingWire, and our big annual event in April, the Gathering, is meant to bring together originators and real estate brokers and team leaders under one roof to learn together, build relationships. And sometimes I feel like I'm running an uphill battle, like trying to tell the mortgage people why this matters to be in this room, tell the real estate people, hey, this is these aren't LOs that are just going to be there affronting you for business. They actually want to bond and figure out a way to win together. Honestly, it always feels like an uphill battle, but I feel like I know it's right. It is the way forward for the housing industry to find that connectivity point and invest in it.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So Victor, back to the 99 days, you were talking about the terrible shell game of compensation. So we fast forward to where we are, 25 years later, and compensation's been cleaned up a lot. A lot of that's what was happening in 99 has been regulated away, but the world finds its way of finding new ways to do things. And we, have a place now where we have this potentially some bucket issues and loan officer compensation. I know it's an area that you've been pretty intensely focused on. So what's going on in compensation today? What are the pros, cons? Are we in a good place, bad place? I'd love to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, honestly. And I understand that competitors are doing everything they can to compete and win, right? It's a pressured situation being a CEO or an owner of an independent mortgage company. It is a pressured situation. It's very competitive. You're trying to hang on to your loan officers. You're trying to recruit loan officers. So you want to be able to leverage everything you can to put your loan officer in a position to win, right? And you want to make as much money for yourself as you possibly can too, right? And so it's kind of a crazy situation because, we did have, I don't know how many people have been around since 99 and dealing with the crazy wild, wild west, but that went on in a sense all the way up until the housing market crashed, right? And is it because the housing is that a reason why the housing market crashed? I don't think so. It is really two separate issues. And I know that Congress came in and passed the law for Dodd-Frank. Loan officer comp had nothing to do, in my opinion, of the market crash. It had everything to do with the fact that Wall Street was allowing customers to buy homes and fog a mirror, right? I mean, it was no income, right? No, stated income, right? You're stating your income, you're stating your assets, and it's 0% down. I mean, what? It's crazy, right? It was nuts. At the time, I was like, this is nuts. This is crazy. I used to say it was like a rubber band. And I'm like, the rubber band is just pulling and pulling and pulling. And before it snapped, I was here with the rubber band. I think by the time it actually crashed, it was here. And I was like, when this rubber band snaps back, it's going to be a colossal. Now, as bad as I thought it was going to be, it was nowhere near how bad it turned out to be. Like, honestly, it was so, it was such a massive backlash. But again, loan officer comp, and again, here's the crazy thing is, and I know a lot of people on this call is not going to agree with me. But because I was so disgusted on loan officer comp, one had nothing to do with the other. So when Dodd-Frank came out and they said, we're going to get involved and we're going to start telling mortgage companies how they should compensate their loan officers, I was like, big brother's coming in. This is ridiculous. This is, doesn't make any sense.
There's a little bit of scapegoating. It was easier for Wall Street to like point a finger at the originator, but really the originator, the IMB was like working within the confines of the system that like our government and Wall Street set up to work within. But
yeah, I mean, like,
my point of view.
All the mortgage bankers are doing, the independent mortgage bankers, we're nobody. We're a salesperson. We're a salesperson for Wall Street. Wall Street's coming to us and saying, sell our product. It was the crazy product that was the problem, not the salesperson being the independent mortgage broker, right? Now, how the independent mortgage broker was being compensated and how they were playing games with customers with rate and fee had nothing to do with the housing collapse. It's not morally right. I'm not in agreement with people taking advantage of less educated consumers. But it's not the reason that the whole housing market crashed, right? One had nothing to do with the other, right? So when Dodd-Frank came out and just said, all right, we're gonna create this new bureau, and they're going to govern what the law is. It was like, oh, geez, it was scary, right? And of course, at the first director, we had Corddry, and he was scary. He was like, because I don't know was any rhyme or reason for him, hitting people with fines and how the fines were being hit, and he was looking for heads, like it was like, there's no doubt,
It was that regulation through enforcement era that we all must
go through. 100%. And that changed. And, but everybody was still like, okay, we are definitely fearful of the regulators, right? But what happened was with the CFPB is they have a mandate that says that they are there to audit 20%, I think, of the general mortgage business nationally. So who gets audited? We were the very first audit in the Midwest, right? And they came in and they said, Victor, you know why we're auditing you guys first? I'm like, first of all, I want to say I'm glad that you are, because I'm glad that I would rather be the first one to really understand, because I have zero interest in doing anything wrong. I would, if I'm doing something wrong, I would like to know, right? Because it's not because it's an intentional thing. It's because it's a mistake. And if you saw something that we're doing wrong, guide me, and tell me. And so we work together. And they said the reason why they chose us is because the Federal Home Loan Bank, most of the people working at the CFPB at the time when they first came from the Federal Home Loan Bank, and the Federal Home Loan Bank employees weren't able to get loans through the people that the institutions that they worked with. So they worked with guaranteed rate. And I didn't know that. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. And they said, a lot of people that we've worked with have had good experiences with you guys. So we wanted to start with you first. So I said, great. So I was like, great. That was great. So we got through the first one, and then something, and then it kept following up. And then next thing you know, like, they're coming in all the time. And I was like, what's the deal? I'm like, well, we only have so much of a budget, and we have to work with all the bigger originators because that helps us cover the ground, on the 20%. I was like, whatever, fine, not a big deal. It's great. At least we're always in communication. We're working with everybody. But the thing I started to realize is all of a sudden over the years, the 80%ers that weren't being audited. And then all of a sudden, I always feared each state. So each state that we had a license in, I feared them because some states were tougher than others. And based on that state, you had to be on your A game and doing everything right and following every rule. And then what happened was when the CFPB was formed, the states, I think, started to back off a little bit. And they all every state has budget needs. And they say, okay, well, let's divert the budget here because you have all these auditors in the mortgage division within the state area. We probably don't need them as much because the CFPB is there to be able to help out, doing the job. And so they go, yeah, it makes sense, and then the CFPB goes, yeah, no, we got it. But what happened was that 80% of the independent mortgage companies are not being audited now. Much, if at all, by either the CFPB, and then the states are, may, do they just have so much bandwidth. They can't audit everybody. So what happens is now all of a sudden you start to have this, this feeling of like, you don't have this pressure on an independent from an audit perspective and a regulatory perspective and an enforcement perspective, right? So, and then the CFPB came out and said, because the Mortgage Bankers Association went to them and said, hey, what do you think about in loan officer comp, allowing loan officers to be compensated differently if it came from a different lead source? And I remember they asked me my opinion on it, and I gave my opinion, and I said slippery slope. I said if people are doing it right, yeah, it works. People aren't, it's a slippery slope. And so they said, okay, well, we'll watch it. I think we're going to agree to it. The NBA wanted it, and they were being cool, so they said, all right, let's do it. We'll agree to it. And that's where the buckets occurred, right? That's when it all started to happen with the buckets. And then what happened was, I think a couple people started going, okay, well, we're going to use this rule and we're going to be able to put this in place. And let's put a branch bucket in there. Let's put a corporate bucket in there. Let's put this in there. And then they go, okay, maybe they did at first track the branch bucket. Maybe they tracked the corporate bucket. Maybe they tracked Zillow's lead bucket. Maybe they tracked a different bucket. And then they realized, well, we haven't had anybody come in and audit us. So I think we might be okay really not being so particular on where this bucket is priced and where the lead came in through this bucket, right? And then another year goes by and they go, oh, okay, well, no one's really coming to us. Or the CFPB goes in, does the audit, and they really are not looking at this and they're not paying any attention to it at all. And the CFPB goes in there and goes, yeah, we did the audit and everything was good. And then they leave, they're doing their job. No, it's not their fault. But they just don't know, and now it's come to where we're now 2024. It's been years of this. And now it's pretty much, I would say there's a significant number of companies that are working within these lead buckets and having a different bucket, and they're calling it different names and not tracking the lead. So it's giving the originator the ability to price the loan where they want. Now, one of the comments that people would have is said, this is a victimless crime situation, right? Victor, all you're doing is giving people better rates, right? Okay, who are you giving better rates to? Is it like 1999 again, where you're giving better rates to all the people that are more educated? Or are you giving better rates to people who are less educated? Are you giving better rates to the single women, older, elderly, different minority groups that maybe are not as familiar with the mortgage process. Who's getting the better rates here, right? Why is it that somebody gets the better rate and somebody doesn't get the better rate, right? Why is that, right? And isn't there a rule now put in place that says that shouldn't happen, right? So, ultimately right now, it's just kind of living in like, are we all going to be on the same playing field, playing the same game, treating customers all the same way? Or is it going to be different, right? And there's different rules for different folks because, some people are able to get away with it because they're not being audited and it's being caught. I don't know.
So do the lower
It's
priced
a
lead
crazy
buckets just
situation right
take
now.
do lower price lead buckets just take commission out of the originator's pocket, or the lower price lead buckets also like at the expense of corporate margin?
The company itself, the owners of these companies, it's to their advantage because their margin's set. Like they're not taking a hit. The originator's taking the hit, right? So
And the
not
originator's making a decision. I'm either going to win this or lose it. So it's 0 or less.
yeah, and the originator's also putting their license at risk, right? Because if they are truly pricing these borrowers into different buckets where they're not, and the lead isn't tracked properly, that it really is a lead from a branch. The branch would have to generate the lead, right? I mean, like, what are they doing from a marketing perspective to generate the lead? It would have to be tracked. And then that lead, then you'd have to price that loan. If that's the case, great, right? But if the borrower has a self-source lead and they talk to the one customer and they say, all right, this person doesn't know that much about the mortgage business, and they don't know, and they ask the general questions. Oh, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, so where are you at in the mortgage process? Like, where are you at right now? Oh, I just started looking. Have you talked to anybody else? Yeah, I talked to the guys from Guarantee Rate. Oh, okay. Who'd you talk to? Talked to Sean Panozzi. Oh, okay. I know where Sean's pricing. I'm going to price you in at this bucket, And then they go, okay, well, now they say, oh, Mr. Jones, have you talked to anybody? No, I haven't talked to anybody yet. Is this your first time home buyer? Yeah, I really don't know. Oh, I got you. I got them to take great care of you. Don't worry about a thing. Here's what we're going to do. Oh, okay. Where's interest rates? Okay. Yeah. And they price them out at their normal comp bucket, the highest rates, right? Because they don't know any different. They don't know any better. So they didn't know to price them lower. But it's all at the same time, wherever they're pricing is the loan officer themselves is taking the hit. They're dropping down. The least educated customers are getting the highest rates. The more educated customers are getting the lower rates, but the loan officer is taking the hit. And all along, the owner of the company doesn't reduce their margin. Their margin stays exactly the same. They're happy because they're just getting more deals. And it just doesn't, to them, it's just like another deal, another deal, another deal. I make my certain margin. When I say margin, so people to know, I make my certain level of compensation on every loan the same. I'm not taking the hit as the owner of the company. So
you called it a slippery slope, and it said like maybe like the originator's license is at risk, but like unless I've missed it, I don't think like the HousingWire newsroom has covered an enforcement on this yet. So like if the CFPB doesn't care, like is the originator actually at risk, or is that just we're not quite at the bottom of the slippery slope yet?
Yeah, I think the CFPB does care. And I think that I don't know this for sure. I think they care. I think they are doing their jobs. I think they're investigating this situation. I mean, I don't know this for a fact.
Yeah.
I think that they are. And I think that they were made aware of this, I think, not long ago. And I mean, not long ago, maybe a little over a year ago I mean, how are they to know that there's this scheme is probably a pretty aggressive word. but
practice. Call it a practice.
Practice is a better word. Thank you. That there's this practice that would not be compliant, right? And so I think that they are being brought up to speed right now and trying to really get their arms around it and starting to look into this whole situation. So yeah, no, I think it's. I think if I was an originator, and this is interesting because I talked to the Mortgage Bankers Association about this 9 months ago now, something like that, and they were, and I brought it to their attention, and they said, "Wait, come on," and then it's like, "Yeah, no, this is really going on," and then I said, "Just check it out," and they got back to me, and they're like, "Wow, you're right. We have done our own research, and we found out that this is a practice that's heavily in play, and this is not good for our industry." And I was like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is like, I was like, I don't know that I care about anybody getting in trouble. I really don't. I just think it's like, it just needs to stop, right? I mean, it's not about somebody getting in trouble. It's just about, let's just level the playing field here. And like, do we really want people playing games with customers like this? I think we kind of got it. It was bad then. Do we really want it still? I kind of think we don't. And they were like, yeah. And they were great. They're like, I agree. So they had an attorney that was part of writing the original law. And he looked into this whole thing and he wrote it and they published it and they sent it out. And the thing is, the attorney in the letter from the MBA specifically states that the individual originator, if the CFP wanted to, the CFPB could revoke their license, could suspend their license. The other thing is really interesting is consumers, if they found out that they got the higher rate and somebody didn't, they could go in and actually sue the individual originator personally and get triple damages. I think it's called, I could be wrong.
Yeah, like treble damage, like what we're seeing with the National Association of Realtors lawsuit, right? The commission's lawsuit, like right now. Well, that's the last thing our industry needs, another public disgrace or public, like, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Exactly. No, it's like, it's not good for the originator. It's not. Yeah. And again, I get the originator why they're doing it. They're like, well, I could beat this loan officer's price. I could do this. I could do that. Well, yeah, I get it, but it's wrong. It's like, I don't know what to say, but you can, and your company's allowing it, but it's not right.
But if we were going back, like you talked about the Cordray era, like we were to go back to that era, we'd expect some like sweeping, like regulation through enforcement, like announcement of a big fine and a big penalty. But like in the era we're in now, like, does this CFPB operate more with like a warning letter, and then like if you don't comply, then it gets hairy? Or like how does this CFPB like act differently than the ones you've seen in the past?
I mean, I think they're very smart, and I think they're very thoughtful. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think we got to give them time. Honestly, I think it's one of those things that I think everybody I met is very bright and they're very smart, and I think they really care about the customer. They care about the consumer and protecting the consumer. And they're made aware of this not long ago. And I think, you give them time, it's going to be, we'll see what happens.
Victor, phenomenal conversation. I told you up front, I just seen half an hour of your time, but here we are, an hour and 15 minutes in. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Really a pleasure.
Yeah, no, appreciate you and the work you guys do. It's great.
That's a wrap, folks. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Powerhouse Podcast.